By October 2021, Matt Carpenter was out of baseball. No team, no contract, a batting average below .20 for 2 straight seasons, 3 All-Star appearances, a Silver Slugger, nearly 30 career FWR in St. Louis, and now nobody wanted him, and what came out of it led to one of the strangest offensive reversals of the StatCast era. But here is the thing about that comeback. It was not a miracle. It was not luck. The data tells you exactly why it happened and exactly what it means. Because what destroyed Matt Carpenter was not age. It was not injury. It was a defensive strategy that had been quietly dismantling an entire category of hitter for nearly a decade. And the numbers are detailed enough to show you precisely how it worked and precisely how he escaped it. The numbers already showed exactly what was happening to him. In 2018, Carpenter was one of the best hitters in baseball. He hit 36 home runs. His WRC plus reached 140, meaning he was producing 40% above league average. He was being shifted on more than 80% of his plate appearances that season, and he was still producing at an elite level. Teams were putting 3 infielders on the right side of the diamond against him every time he stepped in, and he was finding ways to make it hurt. But the data was already showing a crack. His pull rate had been climbing. In 2020, it hit 52%, the highest of his career, and his shift rate had climbed with it, reaching 97% of all plate appearances. Nearly every single time Carpenter came to the plate, 3 infielders were stacked on the right side of the infield, and now he was pulling the ball into that wall of defenders more than ever. The result was statistical collapse. A .186 average in 2020, a 169 average in 2021, a .605 OPS across 180 games over those 2 seasons. The Cardinals declined his $18.5 million option. Texas signed him to a minor league deal and released him before he reached the roster. By the numbers, the shift had not just slowed Matt Carpenter down, it had made him unplayable. Subscribe if you want more baseball stories where the numbers explain what everyone else missed. That is when he called Joey Votto. Votto was in Paris on vacation. He was not expecting the call. The two had played against each other in the NL Central for years, but had never spoken for longer than a few seconds near first base. Carpenter told him the truth. He said he thought his career might be finished. He asked Votto to tell him honestly whether he had anything left. Carpenter later admitted that part of the reason he made the call was because he no longer trusted his own evaluation of himself. For years, he had been one of the smartest hitters in baseball. Now he was watching routine ground balls turn into automatic outs and wondering whether his bat speed had disappeared entirely. The shift does something psychologically brutal to hitters over time. It turns solid contact into failure often enough that players begin questioning swings that are still physically capable of producing at a high level. By the end of 2021, Carpenter was not just trying to rebuild mechanics. He was trying to figure out whether the version of himself that had once been an elite hitter still existed at all. What Votto told him was not complicated, but it required Carpenter to understand something that most pull hitters in that era never fully accepted. The shift had not beaten his bat. It had beaten his approach. He was still swinging the same way he had swung for 15 years, pulling the ball into a defense specifically designed to take it away from him. Every analytics department in baseball had years of his spray charts. Teams already knew the map of his swing, and he kept hitting into it. The phone call turned into a plan. Carpenter traveled to a hitting lab, a private coach, and a college program built around rebuilding his swing. The goal was not to stop pulling the ball. It was to make him unpredictable again. If a hitter can genuinely drive the ball the other way with authority, the shift stops being a trap. Teams cannot stack the right side if doing so leaves third base and the left center gap completely open. The shift only works when the defense knows exactly where the ball is going. The Yankees signed him to a major league deal in May 2022. Most analysts projected him somewhere between replacement level and a modest bench contributor. A 36-year-old with 2 consecutive seasons below 200 and a career worst exit velocity had earned that skepticism. What happens instead became one of the most watched statistical anomalies of that season. In 47 games with New York, Carpenter hit .305 with 15 home runs and a .72 set slugging percentage. His WRCPS was 17. He was producing at more than twice the rate of a league average hitter. He set a Yankees franchise record by hitting 13 home runs in his first 30 games with the team, a mark that had stood since Kevin Moss in 1990. He became only the third player in the modern era to reach 14 home runs within his first 29 hits with any team, joining Mark McGwire and Derek Dietrich. The spray chart data from that stretch explains exactly why the numbers looked the way they did. Carpenter was using the entire field. The defensive stack the teams had been running against him for years suddenly had open ground on the opposite side, pitchers who had been working him inside for 3 seasons, confident the shift would erase whatever contact he made, had no answer when he started taking outside pitches the other way with real power. The shift percentage he faced in 2022 was lower than in any previous season. Once he became unpredictable, teams stopped committing to the extreme alignment. The broader data from that era tells the same story at the league level. By 2022, MLB teams were shifting on 38% of all plate appearances. Against left-handed hitters, the number was 62%. More than 6 out of every 10 at-bats for a left-handed hitter came against a realigned defense. The league batting average fell to .243, the lowest since 1968. Lefty pull hitters were not struggling because they were hitting the ball poorly. They were struggling because the ground balls they had produced for singles, their entire careers were now rolling into gloves of infielders, standing where no infielder was supposed to be.
Freddie Freeman solved this quietly over years.
A career .301 hitter. Facing shifts throughout the late shift era, Freeman developed one of the most efficient opposite field approaches in the game. His short swing and his ability to stay through the hitting zone consistently sent the ball into areas the infield was vacating. Teams that shifted against him were conceding exactly the ground their defenders had just abandoned. That sustained discipline is a large part of why his numbers held up across an entire decade of heavy shifting. David Ortiz was doing the same thing earlier and louder. He was shifted on more than almost any hitter of his generation. During a documented stretch in 2012, he went 7 for 8 on ground balls the other way against the shift. He built opposite field power at Fenway that turned the defensive strategy into an opportunity that turned defensive strategy into an opportunity. His 315 average in his final season, at 40 years old, against defenses still shifting him constantly, is the statistical version of a direct refutation. In 2023, MLB banned the shift. Left-handed hitters' ground ball averages rose. Singles returned. The league average climbed. The headline story was that the rule change worked. But the more revealing story is what happened to the hitters who had already figured it out before the ban arrived. The opposite field discipline Carpenter, rebuilt across 3 states, did not disappear when the shift did. The approach Freeman had refined for a decade kept producing in standard alignment. The skills those hitters built to beat the shift turned out to be valuable against any defense. The shift era sorted hitters into 2 groups, the ones who stayed predictable and watched the numbers take everything they had built, and the ones who took what the defense was telling them and rebuilt their approach around it. One of them rebuilt his entire second career on a 3-hour phone call to Paris. The data was always going to tell you which group survived. The only question was whether the hitters themselves were listening.